from the ground upwards. But I also run Be More Pirate, and I suppose the reason I was drawn into Trust the People is because I learned through doing Be More Pirate that pirates were really democratic in the way that they lived and worked together, and that they kind of pioneered new ways of doing it that was beyond command and control. And you know, I think about, God, if pirates could find a way to, you know, resolve conflict and you know, go for some big goals, surely so can we. We can move past this kind of infighting, shouty politics that we've become really accustomed to. So whilst I use, you know, pirates as an example, through Trust the People, I've definitely learned loads about how to do this better, and facilitated lots of workshops and spaces to try and figure that out. And I think that one of the things that comes up all the time is this fear around what happens when you give everybody a say. There's a lot of fear around how you manage that, and what if people disagree? What if they put forward ideas that, you know, you in the council maybe really don't want? And doesn't this just ultimately result in a lot of boring, endless bureaucracy and meetings? So we're here to kind of open that up and go, no, it's going to be up to us to fundamentally decide what a transformative politics looks like. And I suppose I'd encourage everybody to try and throw away any kind of rule book or ideas you might have about how a gathering or a meeting should run. This is like the space to totally reimagine it, because it is a really, really simple idea. We've been handed down this thing that cooperation and collaboration are hard, but they don't have to be. And that's what we're going to explore in the workshop. It's really, yeah. So yeah, over to you, Greg.
Yeah. So what we'll do together, so that's our little intro. I hope you loved it. What we're going to do together is kind of build a list of what is important and what's needed for an assembly or meetup or gathering, whatever you want to call it, to be all of the things that we need it to be, right? To be part of this big, you know, transformative cultural shift. We're going to build that together and then work through it, and together share what you think, and Alex and I will share what we think, and hopefully we'll cover all of the important bases. So to start that, and also to act as a little bit of a check-in, I thought we could take a minute to, all of us individually, just try and remember a time that you've experienced that's been, you know, a really good sort of positive experience in a group. So any kind of moment where you've been part of a group, whether it's a meeting or maybe it's not even a meeting, maybe it's part of a club, and you've just felt like, okay, this group is working really well together. So just take a moment to think of that. You know, you can close your eyes if that's helpful, turn your camera off if you like, and write it down. And I'll give you about a minute to do that. All right, hopefully you've got that memory and that feeling. Now, we'll go into smaller groups, and you can obviously just sort of introduce yourself, say who you are, how you're feeling, and yeah, and then take a minute to share your memory. And we'll do this. We'll be in groups of 3 to 4, and we'll do this for about 5 minutes. So if you could just keep an eye on the time and don't spend more than 60 seconds just sharing your memory, just so we stay punctual. All right, see you all soon. Hope the chats are good. All right, welcome back. I hope that was nice. I want to hear a few examples, actually. I'd love to hear a few anecdotes that anybody's got. If you've got one to share, maybe just write in the chat something like stack or pick me or whatever. Or you can put your finger up and maybe I'll see you that way. We can try all the ways. All right, Paul Dadge, take it away.
Hi everyone. My experience really is my live one now. I'm a former Labour councillor, and last June, so during the middle of the pandemic, a group of us came together and we formed an independent group. And to move from something that was very, very negative, an atmosphere of harassment, to move to something now which is very, very inclusive and absolutely about the community and everything to do with the community, and having people with different skill sets who are actually, you can give them a job and they'll actually go away and do that job, as opposed to someone saying, yeah, I want that job, and disappearing and never doing it. I'm in a really positive place now, and that's just great.
Wow, thank you so much, Paul. That is that's like 10 points for being on topic. It's fine, by the way, if people don't have examples of, that are like to do with politics or whatever, but thank you so much, Paul. That was really sort of illustrative. Viv, do you want to go next?
Yes, I already shared this with my little group when I arrived late, but in Bexhill, a couple of years ago now, we were in the middle of our big campaign for a town council, and we made a video, we had speakers, and we held a meeting in the local big church. And there were posters all over town, but actually you have no idea if anyone's going to come. Put it on social media, but Bexhill isn't very social media-ish really, and also there's very vicious attacks when you are. So it was all a little bit suck it and see, and 260 people turned up. And what was wonderful was that you felt part of something, and clearly so did they. And the opposition, which we have a few nasty ones of, were there, but they took their cue from everybody else, and their criticisms were sort of muted and quiet, and they couldn't cause the same trouble as they call on social media.
Yeah.
And so that was a really positive experience, and it showed me, it made me believe that things are possible when you actually might doubt that it was actually possible to meditate on a Saturday morning. To get that many people to a meeting was pretty amazing. So
yeah,
that was really inspiring for us.
That's so good. Big up the Bexhill crew. That's awesome. I heard that sort of what I can pull out of that story is the sense of belonging that you felt after that big group coming together. You're like, oh, here I am, part of this group. Yes. And also I found it interesting, the opposition people being there and that conflict not kind of erupting into this unmanageable way, but being all right. That's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Viv. Deborah, do you want to go next?
Yes, I mean, what I shared with my group was having a very positive party political experience. Decades ago, though, I was a Green in a Labour-controlled city, and because we had the content of what we wanted to say sorted, and it was pretty radical back in the day, we were able to focus a bit more on the process internally, and did masses and masses of door knocking with nothing to show for it for years and years and years, and then finally ended up jointly running the council decades later. I don't think you can underestimate, though, potentially how much work you may need to do to win people over, because party politics is such a dirty word. I'm now not doing party politics anymore, because I do believe it actually creates more barriers than it breaks them down. And so really just want to say, so I've got active locally in the community, setting up a local farmers market, setting up a school streets group, trying to look at the issues. So I think the stumbling block for me is going to be changing the processes and how you use new ways of working to engage people in. No, I'm going to change my point or my question. I can see how it can work if you want to introduce cycle lanes, try and encourage people to drive less, have a, play park versus housing development. But when you have to deal with big issues that are coming from above, so we're expected to build 100,000 homes in Oxfordshire, I find that quite daunting, the prospect of actually tackling the growth, moving away from carbon-led lifestyles, etc. There's a lot of work to be done to win hearts and minds. So that's about the content as well as the process.
Yeah, I hear that.
Not clear how you kind of manage both without wanting to just retire and go and tend your allotment.
Yeah. It's tempting. Those veggies aren't going to tend themselves. I wonder, Deborah, could you just describe to me the bit of the process? So you were talking about the good feeling with the Green Party after a lot of time not getting anywhere door knocking. Could you describe the bit of the process that you worked on that you felt worked well?
Well, no, both. We had to do both. So all the things that have been referred to around going for a drink after meetings, we've really had to work on ourselves to ensure that everybody internally was heard.
Yeah.
I don't think you can underestimate how hard it is. It doesn't come naturally to people, all the things that we're talking about. If it did, we'd be doing it. And we're so ingrained. We've got so many just ingrained behaviors in people that we need to change. So just learning to listen.
That's perfect. That's
and learning to be brave and to try things that hadn't been tried before. So if you make a list of all the things that come naturally to you and you think about what the opposite of that might be, learning to not be afraid of people that think or look different to you. All the things that we know. I mean, look at us in this room. It's blatantly obvious who's not here.
Yeah.
Reaching out to different people. I don't know. I mean, I can ball for England on this.
No, but the bit that I was looking for was what you said about everyone being heard in the organisation and that not happening, and that being a need. Do you mind, Deborah, if we move on to Emily? Your other points were really valuable as well, and thanks for sharing them. Emily, do you want to go last, and then we can crack on?
Sure. So I just spoke about in our room how just kind of the idea of kind of leaving, I guess kind of like opinions, or kind of not necessarily opinions, but like kind of party politics or like previous grievances at the door, and having a space to like share openly and listen to other people. So just kind of having an open mind, I suppose.
Yeah, that idea of listening again, leaving like resentments at the door, really important stuff. Okay, thank you all so much for that little glimpse into what has worked well for you in groups before.
Yes. So whilst you've been talking, I've been typing. For the next, so we're going to basically continue this conversation because there's so much in what was just said that could be unpacked, and I think there just needs to be a deeper and broader discussion on all of this stuff, which is what we're going to do. So we've sort of started to build a bit of a list based on a conversation Greg and I had around what we've learnt around how to change and transform this political culture and the kind of ingredients we need. And what I've done is we're going to use a flinger board, which I'll put a link in the chat now. So if you have the ability to open it in another tab on your computer, I appreciate some people will be using their phones and things, so you might not be able to. I will share my screen in a minute so that you can see it. Here's the link if you'd like to open it yourself. I will just share it so you can sort of see what we're going to do. One moment. I don't think I can share my screen. Yeah, I think you might have to make me host for a bit.
There you go.
Okay. Come on, share my screen. There we go. Yeah, maybe it was working, it's just me. Okay, so can everybody see this sort of these colourful squares? So I'm going to zoom in. As you'll see in the bottom right hand corner, there's a kind of zoom button. So you'll be able to zoom in and zoom out. to look at the notes. They're supposed to be like post-it notes. And what we've done is we've kind of got 6 areas that we think are important in terms of creating a new culture and gathering ourselves differently. The first one is making this whole thing more fun, playful and engaging, which is very much part of the flat pack ethos. Secondly, striving to be inclusive, and I've added a few of the notes that you've just mentioned now around, uniting people from different skill sets, having an open mind, resisting claiming personal credit, all ideas that might contribute to a more inclusive culture.
You've got this person coming. I might need your help just to lift these through. My hand is very sore.
Hang on, somebody is not on mute.
Okay, I'll carry on. Number 3 is about a safe and honest space. So how do we, this is probably a little bit more about conflict, but open to interpretation. And I put in there the point about tackling decisions that come from above, because that's about sort of transparency about what you can and can't do, I think. Moving it from being being transactional to relational. So we're really used to meetings being about tasks and agendas, and often quite a clinical, professional sort of setting. And how do we unlearn that process and do something that is much more about making the relationships the foundation of this? And then 5, we've got making it meaningful. And I think the brilliant example of the big gathering that felt, really lent itself to that sense of belonging. That's what we're talking about when we say meaningful. How does this come alive and doesn't just sound like the council do this and it sound all quite boring. And then over here we've got another slightly I feel like this is one of Greg's areas of interest. How do we keep the council sort of autonomous and not finding itself subsumed and sucked into an institutional or political culture that we're really used to? So we're essentially going to have some broader conversation about all of these areas, and if there's things on there that you want to add that haven't emerged, or feel free to throw in new ideas. The way that this works, for those of you who've never used Flinger before, you basically just need to, if you've got a comment, you can write it. I'm just going to move my Zoom thingy up here. No, not this way, over here, just so I can see what I'm doing. And people are moving things around as well. So if you want to, I don't know, post a comment, you just write it in the little square box up here. So I don't know, use music, for example. If I was going to put that in the make it more fun category, just change it to a purple square, and you just put use music, and then it will come, and then I move it up here. It's just a way to help collect all the ideas and notes. Like I said, if you're finding it difficult or you can't use it, no problem, no obligation to use it. We're going to go into breakout rooms.
Alex, did you have to click send? Because I can't get anything to go in a square. What did you do?
I just clicked the return button. So
okay, that's good. Thanks.
Yeah. Sorry, you can click send. Send should work, but you can also click the return button. So I hope that feels relatively easy for everybody. I'll just stop sharing that and make sure there's cool. And I'd say that as we go into breakout rooms, maybe it might be useful for just one person to be taking the notes in the Flinger board, just because then we'll get otherwise you'll get like a lot of people at once and it might feel a little bit chaotic. So yeah, maybe allocate one person in the group to talk about it.
And we were thinking that so if you can't use the Flinger board, or you're not finding it easy or whatever, then by all means just type in the chat and then we can add it for you. And shall we just give people sort of no, okay, here was the plan. Sorry, I've just remembered the plan. So we've got these kind of like 6 sections. And what we were thinking would be good is if you feel like you're drawn to one of them. So if you're like, okay, I know what is needed to make a space fun and playful, or I've been thinking about inclusivity a lot, I want to talk about that. If you're drawn to one of these, then maybe we could put you into a group with other people who are drawn to them and spend sort of 10 minutes really fleshing out one in detail. So what we're hoping to have is 6 kind of parallel conversations about each of these different areas. Is that making sense so far? Yeah. So the way that we're going to do that is either going to work or not sure. But what I was thinking, so if you can all see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I was thinking if you just put a number, the number of the one you want to talk about at the start of your name.
Right, that's a gallery view. That's how many people are on this call.
Hang on, Diana, we can hear you, and that's all right. And yeah, so if you just put the number of the group, the sort of topic that you want to talk about at the start of your name, then when we make the breakout groups, it'll be really easy to allocate you to the conversation.
There a list somewhere? Can you remind us what they are?
Yeah, might be good. Maybe I'll just type it in the chat as well, or maybe Alex, would you mind typing it as I read them out?
Yes.
So number 1 is fun, playful, and engaging. So that's a kind of need for our assemblies, to make them fun, playful, engaging. Number 2 is striving to be inclusive. Number 3 is making the space safe and honest. Number 4 is making it relational and not transactional. So that has included things like, so far at least, like learning to listen. And it's about focusing on the relationships that are being built in these spaces. Number 5 is making it meaningful. So it's giving the sense that something is happening out of this assembly. It's not just a kind of ticking the box exercise. It's not another sort of public consultation that's going to get ignored. It's a real thing that matters. That's number 5. And number 6, yeah, autonomous. So this was about the assembly being not totally owned by the council and the councillors. So maybe this is going to get a bit clearer later when we talk about it in more detail. But it's kind of about giving an assembly its own legs, so that it doesn't depend on councillors to be running them and starting them. It's so that the community can kind of have its space where it gets together and talks about what it cares about, not just at the whim of the councillors. Maybe that doesn't make sense yet. Maybe that's only in my head, and that's fine too. So would you mind just changing your names? So at the start of your name, put a number. Some people have done it already. That's great. If you're struggling with changing your name, let me know. How do you do this actually? So you go over your screen, your little window, click the 3 dots, and then it says rename.
Greg, there's a lot of frustrating overlap. Like for me, autonomy and meaningfulness are potentially the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear that.
As long as the boundaries are quite loose, that's fine.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll find that they weave in and out of each other. So if you just want to sort of shut your eyes and like pick one. So how are we doing? We've got a good set of numbers here. Are some people sort of okay not to be sort of not drawn to any particular and might just be put in a random one? Is that all right? So we can do that as well. Okay, great. Give you like another 15 seconds to do that, and then we'll open the breakout rooms.
It's gonna it's a little bit confusing to do.
Are you making the breakout rooms, Alex?
I am, but the thing is, we have a lot more breakout rooms than we have topics. So, in the spirit of experimentation, I will. I'm going to make you host. But I think that for this, it's quite useful to have just identified an area that you'd like to talk about, and perhaps we're going to get a bit more of a blend than we imagined. And having put the number there, you've just got a bit more of hey, I'd like to touch on this area for the conversation. Yeah, just let me.
Yeah, a bit of an experiment. Haven't done this exactly like this before. So, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, so what normally happens? Maybe it's just start. What normally happens is it does it sort of alphabetically, but it's not done it now. All right. Well, let's scrap that idea and let's go and talk about the bit that we wanted to talk about in a group with other people who are talking about different groups.
Let's randomize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And you've got about 10 minutes. So if you could try and all speak equally, that would be great. A couple of minutes each.
Oh.
We were on a roll.
Bring the roll into the rest of the group.
Just getting started, Greg.
Great. That's always the way. Flinger is awesome. Great.
That flinger is fantastic, isn't it? I've never seen it before. It's like post-it notes that don't fall on the floor.
I'm trying to get it back so I've got all the people.
I don't know how it is.
Flinger is free to sign up to. If anyone wants to get their own Flinger account for some practice, please. Yeah, it's quite handy and not too complicated, I think.
Cool. So now we're going to work through the areas, try and sort of consolidate the different wisdom coming out of the different groups. And then, and Alex and I will share bits and bobs about each. And I think, Alex, I'm not sure what you think about this, but I think we should try and end at sort of 2:10, so that there's a little gap between this one and the next session. So we might have to be a little quicker than we wanted to be with each of the segments, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, do you want to kick us off with the first one?
Yeah, so the first number one is fun. So we're going to sort of roughly go around the areas in some kind of order, although we do appreciate there is a bit of a blend. But we kind of wanted to, this is quite a lot written on that part, so love anyone to come in with some thoughts and ideas about how we make gatherings more fun, engaging, playful. I know, Adrian, you put stack in the chat, but if anyone's got anything specifically number one they'd love to share, please, pop stack in. I think that's easiest. Just pop stack in the chat if you'd like to share on that point. Yes, Deborah, and loved your comment there, yeah.
I think we underestimate how really cool just being passionate and committed and having integrity about what you believe in is, as far as fun and engaging goes. Some of these things are really serious topics, and it's really great to hear someone on the doorstep who doesn't have an agenda outside of, coming from the community that you want to engage with and facilitate in making things better for more people. So don't underestimate what you already bring to the table, and the rest will kind of follow.
Nice reflection. Jim, do you want to come in?
Well, in our conversation, we ended up talking about Zoom. I've never been to a borough council meeting in my pajamas physically, but Zoom allows you to do it. So, the sort of fun element of that is come to the meeting in your pyjamas, and I'm sure there's every one of us. I have a nice white shirt on, but you wouldn't believe how dirty my trousers are from being outside. So that was fun and engaging. You could have a leaflet which says, come to your meeting in your pyjamas. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Paul, do you want to?
Yeah, a slight contrast. I agree absolutely with Jim about making it fun, etc. But also, I think we found that if I reflect on the meetings we've kind of tried to run in our last campaign, we had a pretty low response at a couple of them. Then we seemed to crack it. I think it was, so we had one kind of public meeting. The hall only holds 100. We had to turn 20 people away, and we had 4,000 views on live Facebook. Okay, so the reason for that, I think you've got to always go about what's in it for me. So basically, people will come to a meeting and engage if they think it's worth it. So if they think they're going to get something out of it. Okay. So therefore, you need to, we need to be talking about the topics that are important to them, which means obviously you need to know what they are. but if you really talk about the real things that really are important to people's lives in your locality, and you tell people that's what's going to be happening, lo and behold, they'll turn up. But I agree with Jim. You need to make it fun at the same time. So you don't want a great rant or just be moaning about stuff. You need to be able to facilitate it. So we can talk about we could talk about rubbish in Portishead. Which we do. So I always say, hi, I'm the chair of the council. I'm talking rubbish again. And you kind of need to kind of be humble as well, I think. And so anyway, I think the key point I make is what's in it for them. It's not about your meeting, about you. It's what's in it for the residents.
Yeah, great. I'm going to call on Dina now. Dina, where are you? Can't see you. Hi. Do you want to explain a little bit about the Camarados spoon rooms, as you put the comment in? But I think people, for those who maybe aren't familiar with them, they are a good example of both fun, inclusivity, and probably quite a lot of other stuff around relationships and meaningfulness.
Fantastic. Hi, Alex, by the way.
Hi.
Hi, McQueen. We haven't seen each other for ages. So Camarados are a great movement that well worth everybody sort of tapping into. One of the things they've done over lockdown is create spoon rooms that people can go to, and there's just a place to sort of be alongside. So we tried this in Colville, and we realised actually what we could do with the power of Zoom is create breakout rooms that people can self-host. So it's going to start slow and build up, but so far we've got a young parents group that want to start, and they might start from a shared issue, but the idea is then gradually introduce people. So how we're going to manage it is have a meet. Everybody turns up together, waves the spoon around. I've got my example somewhere. Have a spoon that is making sure everybody gets to contribute, but then they'll all self-select a room they want to go in. So the young parents can get together, and the minors can get together, and they can all get together, come back and feedback with each other, and then have an hour where people can just network and start chatting on whatever they want to chat. So it's a way of bringing people together based on their own interests, and then sort of trying to mix up. So we've just started it. It's our third week this Tuesday, and I put the link in the chat. So anybody's welcome.
And I'd add that when Camarado, just to add to how they facilitate it, like if you go in, it's called a spoon room because you have to decorate a spoon, and when you speak you hold up your spoon, and it's just kind of adds a level of comedy to the situation that breaks down the initial barrier or ice around you are pretty much going in there as strangers, so it can be quite effective. Is there anyone else who wanted to talk to the point about playfulness and fun? Okay, cool.
Alex,
Yeah.
I was just really interested in if Deanna can just explain the actual technicals of, is it just a breakout room? So people would say, I want to go into this room, I want to go into that room, and then you would put them into the breakout rooms? Because I'm just looking at the website and stuff, and it looks great.
Yes, it's similar to that. It's slightly better even, because if you can set it up so people can self-select their own breakout rooms. What we've found is that sometimes, whether it's the older version of Zoom or you're on a computer or a phone, sometimes you can't and you have to select. But obviously everybody can select to move out of a room. So I basically stay in the main room, and do the sort of the beginning and the end bit. Anybody that hangs around in the main room, we chat. So last week I was chatting to a young person and somebody from a college who, when we started talking about a skate park, and they were two people that had never met before, and now they're talking about how to potentially come together to take over a leisure centre. So it's pretty cool, and we're going to be thinking big, of getting people sort of dreaming about what could happen, but then actually trying to make it happen. But yeah, self-selecting the rooms I think was really important, and self-hosting as well. So if somebody comes along one week and decides they want to host a room about something, the week after they can host it.
So is this through Zoom, or is this a separate software?
Just through Zoom.
Yeah, okay,
The
cool.
power of Zoom, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to suggest you guys connect if you want to maybe chat a bit more in detail, just so we can move on to broadening out the conversation. Greg?
Yeah, so I'm going to merge the next two because I feel like we're running slightly out of time. It is amazing to see what's been written on the Flinger board. There's so much there. I'm going to jump slightly ahead to safe and honest, and then go back to striving to be inclusive. And I guess I just want to, so I'll start by speaking, and then I'll invite you all to share some of the bits that you've talked about in your chat. I guess the safe and honest thing, I think what helps with that is good facilitation. And I feel like one of the sort of key things that I feel like communicating in this session is about facilitation and what facilitation can do. And really, like, I think it's about changing this idea of like chairing a meeting or hosting a space into something a bit new. So a facilitator's role is to make it easy for everyone to participate fully. So this comes back to the inclusivity thing slightly, because in spaces, it's, complicated, and I won't go into why exactly, but oftentimes some people feel like taking up more space and some people feel like taking up less space. And also subconsciously what happens quite a lot is the sort of more confident, louder people are perceived to be like right and to have the correct ideas, or to even have the ideas that most people share. And so a facilitator's role, so this is kind of one of the like subtle ways that sort of bigger inequalities in societies can worm their way into our meetings. So a facilitator's role is to try and level this out, to get everybody feeling like they can speak. I feel like a part of that is just being a vulnerable, normal human, but also, having certain practices that work. So the reason I've hijacked things a little bit here is because I just wanted to share these practices and then to hear from you all. So one thing that is really useful is having a kind of like statement or reminder about the culture you're trying to make. So in some of the sort of people's assemblies, there's a reminder that you say at the beginning that is, I'll just copy it into the chat actually. So obviously you don't have to use this, but when you like say something like this, when you set a sort of intention, it can do quite a bit to shift people's minds and how they're feeling and thinking about something. So this is the reminder that we've used before. We value all voices equally. It's the aim to hear the wisdom of the crowd, not to have it dominated by individuals and groups. We recognize that confident speakers are not always right. We value all voices equally. Ask you to do the same. We don't tolerate calling out, abuse, or shaming. Welcoming all people, but not all behaviors. So that's just it's part of the kind of ways of working thing. And I don't want to say this is the one you have to use, but getting together with your group and thinking, okay, what do we want to have happen here? And then just reminding everybody of that at the beginning, I think can be a really important part of changing the culture. So that's one bit that I wanted to mention, at least. I guess other techniques include this idea of active listening, which I think is really important for creating a kind of safe and inclusive space. And active listening is just a really simple way of making sure that when somebody's speaking, you're trying to like quieten the voice in your head that's going, okay, how am I going to react to that? Like, what am I going to say when it's my turn to speak? How am I going to phrase what I'm trying to say when it's my turn to speak? And just focusing on what you're hearing and the person in front of you. So that's a kind of practice that, you know, it's hard to get right, but we can all kind of start to do it. And it really shifts, I've seen it really shift the kind of culture of a group. Okay, so I just wanted to share that before throwing it open a little bit. I would love to hear from any of you about either of these two. So you spoke about them in your groups. Does anybody have anything to say about making a safe, honest space and striving to be inclusive? Just write stack in the chat again. Mike Hailstone.
It's sort of, I have a small hotel, and one of the things I used to do after I cooked dinner was go out and speak to our guests, and I used to call that the Reelston soapbox, because obviously you would go in there and various people have various opinions about stuff. So in a way, thinking about it now, I suppose I used to facilitate in a way that I used to play devil's advocate. So if you, Greg, for example, were on your soapbox talking about, you know, any political view or football team, even if I agreed with you, I would go against you and stir it. And that way I would bring the other guests into the conversation. And then when it got nice and fiery, I'd often pick up a tray of tea and then go out and leave them all arguing. But the idea behind it was that in that room, everybody would have an input. And the more people that had that input, the more of a good night they had, or a good meeting, if you like, in essence, which sort of is what it ended up being, as opposed to one guy, you know, dominating the shop floor, as it were, or the soapbox, and everybody else having their own thoughts about what they were saying, but not actually expressing them or not having an input into it. So that's sort of the way I think a form of facilitating would be. So even if you agree with Mr. Loudmouth, you know, go against him and, you know, start to like touch paper everywhere else around the room so that other people can come in.
Yeah, I would basically suggest that maybe like slightly tone down the wanting to like create a massive conflict thing. But I think that's a really good facilitation practice, is thinking, so there's an opinion emerging, you know, people want, you know, to build a new swimming pool or whatever, and asking the group, so who doesn't agree that that's a good idea, rather than being like, okay, let's try and make sure everybody agrees on this, valuing the people that might not agree and not being afraid of that difference and trusting that you can work through that difference. So thanks, Mike. I appreciate that example.
If it was getting out of hand, then I would use our first subject, humour, to, you know, put out the flames of, you know, outright revolution, if you like.
Yeah, I love it. Has anybody else got any thoughts on any of that so far? I guess what's occurring to me is this idea of conviviality, of just like, you know, remembering the first time you turned up to a meeting. What did that feel like? You know, what's scary and what's inviting, and thinking about, how to create that sense of warmth. So even just small things like inviting people, welcoming them, etc. Alex, should I pass back to you?
Yeah, I was just going to add that when we were talking about facilitation earlier, and how, you know, there's an element, especially probably with Zoom and digital, doing it digitally, that you have to be prepared for an element of unpredictability all the time, that you are always going to be bringing human beings and their emotions and their dynamics into a space. And you don't always know how many people are going to be there and what the balance will be like. So no matter how much you prepare and plan your session, like that's a sort of skill to practice, being a bit more okay with how to guide, and also strike a balance between guidance and allowing people to lead and seeing what comes up for them in the moment, which I think is something that you get better at with time. So go easy on yourself if the first time you start to facilitate things, you don't feel that you're particularly good at it, or you haven't got it right, and that could just be the dynamics that day. So I'm going to move on and just I'm going to blend the next two together as well. The idea of sort of relational versus transactional and making it meaningful. And I think relational and meaningful are very much the same sort of thing for a lot of people, starting with the foundations of relationships rather than tasks, quite a simple switch. And that, quite often when you start with the relational, you get the meaningful from it. There was a couple of good examples in my group, but one thing that I wanted to add before opening up that's always struck me is our use of language. It's a really simple thing to change and focus on, but can quite accidentally fall into the professional speak or not using plain English and not thinking about how human you sound when you talk about it, about whatever you're talking about, especially when you take on board a professional role or some kind of status. In fact, it's even in the statuses that we gain. I think Peter always gives the example of being referred to as Your Honour when you become the mayor, and how that feels quite out of sync with what the culture you're trying to create. So how does language make it feel clinical? That's quite an easy switch to make often, and just being conscious of it. Would anyone else like to come in on that, on the topic of meaningfulness and relationalness? Please put stack in the chat if you'd like to talk. But loads of great comments. I'd also say that there's a bit of tension coming up here around creating inclusive, safe spaces versus, ensuring that there is space for conflict as well, because it will be there. And if you bury it, then you get into all kinds of trouble too. So how do you allow it, and especially if you're going to go through a period of transitional change, it's likely to feel uncomfortable. So what room can you give for that, and how are you going to manage it? Everyone knows everyone's names. I love that. Yeah, that is a Deborah, do you want to come in?
Yes, I guess I'm wondering about how one lets go of the sense of urgency around decision making when one's instigating new processes that are as much about adjusting yourself to new behaviors and new ways of working. i.e., if the outcome was just we learn to work differently together, that in itself would be a project and a piece of work. But if you actually have to set a budget this year, have to make a decision about housing versus green space, and you're also introducing a new process, yeah, I'm feeling a sense of panic maybe. And we've got elections, hopefully, for the sake of democracy, at some point soon. So there's a real sense of urgency, and I'm trying to take deep breaths. Anyway, answers on my postcard, please.
Yeah, really, really, really good point. And that's probably the reason why none of this ever happens. Why we never change how we work. But I'd say, if you want one answer on a postcard, it would be don't think of it as an overwhelming task. No one's asking you to solve everything today or tomorrow or next week. Just have one meeting. Just ensure one meeting is a dedicated space to talk about this. But pretty much like we're doing now, just giving some time over to thinking about this stuff. And you might find that that is enough to create just about the right amount of shift that you need to get started. Maybe agree upon one different way of working. Like, okay, for the next, when we do the budgeting, we're going to have a facilitator, and we're going to find a competent facilitator in our locality and use that and try it. And that, so don't go for the whole, just find one thing. Viv, I'm going to go to you now.
Yes, coming from a different position, you were talking about tension. We had a public meeting, and everybody was supposed to talk for about 2 minutes from the floor, and we had the microphones going around and so on. And it was a very participative meeting. It was big, but it went really well. And then at the back, a lady stood up who was very distressed, and she had a big worry about her daughter who had mental health issues and wasn't getting any help. And the daughter had written a letter which she wanted to read out loud, and she proceeded to read the thing out loud. And the minutes ticked by, and the person holding the bell was looking panicky. Shall I ring? Shall I not ring? everybody wanted her to be quiet after 10 minutes. Nobody wanted to ring the bell on her. People began to leave the meeting. And finally, somebody managed to persuade her to sit down and we try and sort it out one-to-one. It was one of those occasions when you can feel everybody feeling compassion for this woman, most people anyway, feeling compassion for the woman, knowing the meeting had to be done, but knowing that somehow we had to find a way of going about it. And we reached a way, but we'd lost quite a few people in the process. And I think those kind of things suddenly come out of the blue, and you suddenly find you have to be decisive but caring at the same time. And I remember that being a real lesson in trying to be frank about what you're doing. Because what we didn't actually do is to take the microphone and say, okay, this is what we're going to do now with this lady. Because it was just too painful for her and not comfortable for any of us. It's just a contribution about trying to cope with conflict.
Yeah.
Such a good example. I think that's it. We learn from the real life examples that we go through, and then we adapt and make our whether it's our rules, our guidance, our statement, code, whatever. You create it from figuring out what went well and what didn't, and you're essentially starting with a bit of a blank slate.
That, can I just say that really speaks to what you said earlier, Alex, about you get humans at these meetings, and it's like never going to go perfectly. And I think just I'd love to imbue a sense of just like trust yourselves to be able to manage that if it comes up. I feel like maybe some of the reason that people try and control meetings very tightly and like only let specific people speak at a certain time is because they're just afraid of what would happen if it feels like it's out of control, or if somebody you know if that starts to happen. And so like if we just sort of can trust ourselves a little bit more to like have enough compassion for this woman and for the group process to be able to like work through it. I hope that's not too sentimental.
I'm conscious of moving on to you, Greg, but I guess also Mike's put Stack in the chat, so we'll go. Let's hear from Mike, and then
I'll just be quick. Yeah, just in terms of conflict, I mean, it's just what you've used. So you're Flingerboard, and there's other equivalents. So I worked in a team where we had a decision to make, and we had two different schools of thought. People were getting aggravated, and so we had just a Flingerboard. We put the two headings, and we got the people together, just like you've just done. We asked for everybody to put all their tickets up. We put them into two. We then discussed it. We heard everybody's voice, and then we agreed that at the end of it, the managers would make an informed decision. At the end of it, it was quite a useful tool. So the Flingerboard or equivalents are really good for making sure you get all the tickets up and getting everyone to see it, and it helps in resolving conflict.
Yeah. Lovely, thanks, Mike. And if there is conflict, I mean, here's a tiny other tool. What really helps, and what I've done in at least smaller groups, is just like ask people to repeat what they've heard another person say. This is maybe more for sort of interpersonal conflict, like two people are beefing. Just like before it snowballs, just say, hold on, like, what do you think that they just said there? And like really make them say it, and then say, is that what you were saying? And if it is or isn't, let them update, and then they can respond and do the same thing. That's just a small practice that I think can really help. So the last one is about autonomy. I guess the main thing that I want to get here, there's loads of really good notes on here actually. The main thing is that I think these assemblies have to be clearly like building on themselves. So when we've done them in the past, so I'm thinking about kind of assemblies that we did in London as part of the Black Lives Matter movement, we were running like lots in different parks outside in North London especially. And to give them a sense of kind of continuity, at the start of one meeting, we might like read out kind of what had happened at the last one. So what were the main points? Where are we at in this journey? So it's not like each assembly is starting afresh every time. There's a sense of continuity that it's building into something. And the other thing that felt really important to do there is to find people who are turning up to these assemblies. And obviously, like, if you're at this point, you know, ask them to be counsellors. It's what they did in Torwich, and it's a great way of finding good people to run. But also ask them if they want to facilitate the next one. Ask them if they want to have, the people that are turning up to them, if they want to have some control over how they're run, how they're working. Maybe you want to, like, you know, mentor them or whatever. And I guess the Trust the People workshops are quite a useful resource for helping these new people that are turning up feel empowered to start running these things themselves. So I'm drifting into the autonomous bit and what I think is important here, which is that what happens, at least, I mean, it's not my analysis, but what tends to happen in these types of things is you get a big community upswell for an election, and the election happens, and then you have councillors, and then sort of the community bit kind of can die away, and quickly the council can just kind of revert back to what it was doing before, because it's path of least resistance. So the way to, like, you know, create our dream that might last is to have the community bit not be totally dependent on the council. Like, it needs to have its own space where it can live and breathe and be alive. And so the assembly can be that space. So ways to do this might be to invite other groups to co-host these assemblies with you. So it's not just these new independent councillors that are doing it. So I think that's mainly a kind of a bit of wisdom that have come from other movements trying to do this stuff that I just wanted to share with you all, like, just about, you know, these spaces being kind of a bit autonomous and not just consultations and not just, you know, at the behest of the councillors. Yeah, because that's what we really want to make here, is thriving communities. Okay, so what we'll do now is just kind of wrap things up slightly, and I'm going to share some resources with you all, and I think we might be able to email them out to you at the end, but I'm also just going to copy and paste them in the chat. There are just 4 things that I want to share. There's obviously loads of stuff out there, but I found these to be kind of particularly useful. So you can have a look through them in your own time. I think one of them that might be, if any of you are feeling like, oh, come on, I just came here for an hour and 20 minutes and I have no concrete ways to do this stuff, the one that's going to be most useful is a literal script for how to run an online assembly. So if you're looking for really kind of like detailed, specific things, this is one that the Trust the People crew made up, and yeah, and it can run you through basically all the bits. So I'm going to share them in the chat, and then I suggest as a little checkout, we just write something in the chat. How's this going to work? Let me share these first, and then I can ask you to write them. So this is the script.
Greg, awesome multitasking. What can I say?
Oh, thank you, Hebra. You've been been singing our praises all day. So the second thing I shared is a guide by a group of sort of social movement organizers, and it's about power and privilege, which I think is such a balanced kind of like analysis of how power can work and little ways to try and distribute it more equally. And it's got really tangible, concrete things to do in it as well, which I think is important, because sometimes you can get a bit sort of bogged down in the sense that, oh, there's inequality, what can we do about it? So that's another guide. And then this last one that I'm going to share is almost more like a directory full of more resources. So if you're like really the nerdy type, this is from, the website looks a bit naff, but this is actually a really good sort of rigorous group of people who are pulling these things together. And then, yeah, and then also you have the Flingerboard. All right. I would love to hear, sorry, Alex?
I'm just going to put also in between all the messages, it's really hard to manage, and I should have helped you with the multitasking, but if anyone wanted to, Trust the People will run another, it's like almost an 8-week course, but not, full-time or anything. There's like a couple of workshops a week that you can join, and you can dip in and out of them as well. It's just like covers in more detail, lots of stuff around assembly, like creating assemblies, covering lots of the stuff we've talked about today. And that will start on the 22nd of February, if anyone kind of wants to do it as an additional kind of learning experience. I've just put that in here, which tells you a brief blurb. Yeah, totally free online learning, and it's just a really good way also to connect with other people doing similar stuff, that you'll meet people through it. And also, obviously, I think the team are brill, and yeah, lots to be learned from that. So yeah.
So if you feel inclined, I would love to hear just like a quick idea from you, a quick thing that you can type in the chat that you're going to take away from this session. That's what I would love to hear. Some idea, some practice, some just like thing to focus on. So have a quick think about that and type it in the chat. And don't click enter yet. Just leave it there in the chat box. All right, you got it? Okay, and I'll just say it's been really nice to share this afternoon with you all. Sorry that a few things didn't quite work out, but I think we've pulled through together. So yeah, thanks so much for coming and listening. It's been a pleasure. Wow, look at all those.
I'm gonna save the chat.
Yeah, the chat. All right, and the next session is starting in 4 minutes. We've got to get off the Zoom, so